Hey YouTube, how's it going? Well, after yesterday's video with the bread making and the fact that it ran a lot longer than I expected it to, I decided that the tips and tricks for bread making beginners should be put off to a different video, so we're doing that today. I don't honestly expect this to be thoroughly comprehensive, but I'm going to try to cover at least the main point. And with that, we'll start out with the yeast. The yeast is the ingredient in bread that makes it rise. Now, this isn't true for all bread recipes. There are bread recipes that don't use yeast. A lot of them, most homemade bread recipes in fact, will use yeast. You want to be sure that it's fresh. Active dry yeast is sold in individual packets, and it's the easiest kind to use, and it keeps for a good long time. They always have a best if used by date on them, and you should stick with those dates. If it's past the date, throw it away. The last thing you want is to have your yeast be not up to snuff because it's too old. And besides, if you're going to take the time to make bread, then fresh yeast is important. There is also cake yeast, if you can find it. I couldn't find it around here. It's supposed to make a really great loaf of bread. This form of yeast it's fresh, it's a block. You store it in a refrigerator, it's very perishable. You have to use it within a day or two or it's liable to mold. The temperature of the water when you're dissolving the yeast or adding it to a yeast flour mixture is very important. Always use a thermometer. When you're dissolving yeast in water or whatever other liquid, you want the temperature of it to be about 110 to 115 degrees. When the yeast is combined with the flour or other dry ingredients, then your liquid temperature can be about 120, 130 degrees. The temperature is very important for activating the yeast. If it's too low, it won't work good at all. If it's too high, you'll kill the yeast. Next up on the list of important ingredients for bread making is, of course, the flour. Ideally speaking, bread flour makes the best loaf. It's higher in protein content, and the protein or gluten is what gives the bread its unique texture. Whenever water is added to flour, two proteins, glutenin and gliadin, I believe that's how it's pronounced, they combine to form gluten. Gluten forms a network of proteins that stretch through the dough, kind of like a web, trapping the air bubbles that form as the yeast ferments. This gives the bread its characteristic air holes and structure. Bread flour is, of course, the best to use. All-purpose flour works very good in most bread recipes as well. You don't want to use cake flour because there just plain isn't enough protein in it. And your bread will end up falling because the structure won't be able to withstand the pressure of the gases that the yeast creates. Whole grain flours and other types of flour add color, texture, and flavor to the bread. These flour types don't have enough gluten to make a successful loaf on their own, but you add a certain amount of all-purpose flour or bread flour to give it the extra structure. While I'm on the subject of flour, there is the subject of measuring flour. What you do not want to do when your recipe, for example, if it calls for a cup of flour, you do not want to just grab up your plain old liquid 1 cup measure and slam a cup of flour into it, especially if your habit is to take dry ingredients and put it in here and pack them down. That will make things come out wrong for the bread. The best way to do it is to get a dry measure like this. And what you do is you scoop the flour into it loosely until it's heaped up over the top. And then you take a butter knife and just take the back of the butter knife and scrape across the top. That way your flour is not packed down or anything like that. A cup of all-purpose flour should weigh in the neighborhood of 120 grams or so. If you measure it that way, it'll come out right. If you pack it down, then you're going to have too much flour in the recipe, and that's going to make things stiff or hard. If you like biscuits made like that, it'll come out like little bricks and stuff like that. You don't want that. Another thing that can change the bread is the liquid you use, whether it's water. Milk and cream-based breads, they end up coming out richer with a finer texture. They will brown more quickly because of the additional sugar and butter fat that's in them. If you're making a whole wheat bread, orange juice is a good addition because its sweetness will help counter the stronger flavor of the whole grain. Eggs also add richness, color, and flavor to the dough. Egg breads have a really good flavor and they work out pretty good. Salt is an important ingredient. It's essential to every bread recipe because it helps control the yeast development. It keeps the bread from over-rising, which contributes to a good texture. Salt also adds some flavor to the bread. It is possible to make a salt-free bread, but then you'll use other ingredients like vinegar or yogurt or something to help control the yeast growth. And then of course there's toppings, egg glazes, whether egg yolk or egg white, both to give it a shiny golden crust or to help things like seeds and other toppings stick to the bread. Like I said, this is not by any stretch of the imagination a complete deal. If I made it really complete, the video would be a lot longer, and it's already starting to get kind of long now as it is. So I'm gonna call that it for now. Perhaps the subject can be revisited in the future. If there's enough interest, I'll be glad to do that. In the meantime, be sure not to miss Wednesday's video, the Ever Present Bologna Sandwich. Alright, take it easy. I'm out of here.
Hello, it's Tuesday, November the 23rd. Oh, bloody hell. I go away for a couple of days, and what does he do? Clap his gums for half or forever. There are 10 new subscribers. Casper Girl 35, McAcernator, ALRASEI, Gaga 100, Ivan Live 577, wacclocc, MrLeafer, ERMC 0608, BrusselsRap, and hiphopanarchy. Welcome, and thank you very much for subscribing. Today's question of the day: you did what in whose yard? The dirty word of the day: jelly.